Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Musa, the Warrior, a Korean action drama from 2001. It stars Woo-sung Jung, Ziyi Zhang, Sung-kee Ahn, and Rongguang Yu. Now it's set in the year 1375. A small diplomatic mission from the Korean kingdom Goryeo travels to Ming China to meet an emperor. But they are arrested in retaliation for the death of a Chinese diplomat back in Goryeo. So they're put in chains, taken across the desert. Then some Mongol raiders suddenly show up and kill the Chinese soldiers that were transporting them, also killing some of the Koreans in the process, including some of the diplomats. So the Mongols ride off. They just leave the survivors in the middle of the desert to die of hunger or thirst. Well, they survive. And the head of these Korean soldiers, General Choi-Jung, takes command after the two diplomats die. Soon after, they discover that these Mongols that attack them have kidnapped a princess. So they attempt to rescue her and return her safely to the Chinese capital, Nanjing, to atone for their diplomatic failure. So this movie, Musa the Warrior they could have just retitled this as Badass the Movie. Because that's what this movie is. It's just badass. Like, from start to finish. You have this group of, tough warriors fighting against another group of tough warriors with a princess in the middle that they're fighting over. And this Korean movie is quite different from, your typical, say, Chinese wuxia film. Even in terms of its visuals, it's different. It does look quite beautiful at times, but this is decisively more gritty than what you would typically see. The desert environments are portrayed as dusty, dangerous, and somewhat unpleasant, while at the same time retaining their natural beauty. There also seems to be an amber hue that's applied to the film at times, which looks quite nice. So this film looks nice, but it definitely gives you that grittiness to it. There are some other environments to enjoy, like forests and a fortress on a seacoast. But the film always conveys a certain ruggedness and harshness that gives Musa a lot of its personality. And that personality carries over to the characters. They're also pretty rugged and tough. There is some dramatic power because the script emphasizes strength through unity and honor. So our protagonist warriors continue to bond with each other as the film progresses. In addition, the dynamics between the main players is pretty interesting. The new leader, this general, tends to act pretty rashly, and his decision-making is not always the best. Then you have the sergeant, the older guy, who is better at tactics. His plans typically work. And that was my favorite aspect of the film, because you have this general who's in charge, who's genuinely trying to do his best, but all the team members know that the sergeant makes better decisions. So that creates some problems in this group of guys internally, even though the sergeant is trying not to take responsibility for the leadership role. So despite the fact that he probably should, he gives them a better chance of surviving against these Mongols. So that whole dynamic I found to be really interesting. There's some automatic tension between the general and a slave, because the slave was officially freed by one of the diplomats before he died. So the general thinks that this guy should stay a slave, even though he's technically free. So that causes problems. You have the Mongol leader, who the protagonists are fighting against. Pretty interesting. He has a very strong sense of honor about him, which I liked. And then we have the princess, who, really likes the slave dude at first, and then he does a few things to get on her nerves. So there's a lot of, dynamics here that really work quite well. A lot of multidimensionality between the relationships, so I really like that. All of these characters really have their flaws as well, which makes them easy to relate to. Musa definitely has some solid character work going on here. The action scenes in this film are grounded, violent, and well executed. Now, this movie is an exception. It's an exception to what I normally like to see in my action movies. There's quite a bit of shaky cam in Musa, the Warrior. There's also quite a few close-up shots and some sharp editing. These are not things that I typically enjoy in my action movies. However, you could tell that the fight choreography in this film is pretty traditional, it's simplistic, it's blunt, and it's aggressive. And that kind of, it was intentionally, I guess, implemented with a lack of precise choreography. You know, you have these weapons, there are these big swords, they look heavy. And you also have long-distance arrow shots. So it's not like these guys are fighting with, like, weapons that you could do a ton of, like, fancy maneuvers with. You know, not a lot of intricacy or finesse in terms of the fight choreography. So these camera and editing styles, I think, are kind of acceptable. They emphasize the sense of chaos and brutality during the fight. So, you know, I liked it. There are a few sweet maneuvers, one of which is in a forest involving a spear. That's pretty freaking awesome. And during those moments, the camera slows down enough so you could see them. So I do think the action design and the camera work worked for this film, even though it usually doesn't for me. And then to round things out, the music is also quite excellent at times. So if you have not seen Musa the Warrior, I strongly recommend it. This movie's it's just good. It's good stuff. Currently available on YouTube for rental and Amazon streaming. So check it out. And as always, we'll see you next time.